learning outside the classroom.
Learning can take place anywhere, anytime.
Life is a classroom where individuals understand that learning is part of life.
Did you really have to go to university to study this?
If I can learn everything on YouTube, on social media, who cares? That's a real question.
It's a vicious circle.
Life is about progress, life is about learning, and life is about transformation. Education can provide the resources, the tools for creating this sense of symphony.
You need to use the space of structured education.
The more we speak about it, the more we get somewhere.
I'm learning right now.
Welcome back, everyone, to episode 5 of Relearning How to Learn. I'm excited to be joined again by Dr. Rakeen, Dr. Rob, and Dr. Hamad. Welcome. I think today's topic really touches how learning outside the classroom. I wanted to start by sharing a little story, and it really kind of puzzled me, and it really struck me, to be honest. I was giving a lecture outside of school, outside of university, to students that were very straightforward and really succinct and direct. And they were having, different people come in from different professions, someone from med, someone from engineering, and I came in with interior design. And so I was giving this lecture about interior design and all the different disciplines, that it's so much more than picking a paint color, me advertising interior. Okay. So much more than picking a paint color. It's about, there's so many different disciplines: exhibition, curatorial, furniture design, residential, commercial, so many different branches. And I was telling them, how important it is to study this and how valuable it can be. And, it was different age groups, right? From teenage all the way to 32. And the first question that kind of ended, they were like, did you really have to go to university to study this? Was it really important? Could you not have studied it from life? I don't know, does university, and I was puzzled. I am puzzled, to be honest. And it was such a fundamental question. But it kind of questions everything that I've done in my life, right? And everything, and a lot of the career paths that other people take. I kind of want to toss that back at you guys. Did you really have to go to university to study this? And could it have been done outside? We can start with you, Sir Hamad.
I want to add to that anecdote of yours because I've got an anecdote of my own. Actually, I've got several, but one that struck me and made me cognizant of the fact that learning can take place anywhere, anytime, under very unlearning conditions. And that was when my son, who was probably just 10 years old then, he came back from the playground and he threw a question at me. He said, "Look, Dad, we were having a discussion in the park, and I want to know, why is Islam the only true religion and the best religion?"
Wow.
And the question struck me hard. And he said, I need an answer to that. I told him, okay, let me think about it. And that thought process took me a good 3 weeks because I was not ready for that question. I thought I was in the comfort zone of my belief system and I knew everything. And, Islam is the right religion. And, but that question made me realize that all my training in philosophy and theology in the classroom, well, if I hadn't had that training, I wouldn't have been able to answer back to my son. But that training did not actually make me ready to answer the question there and then. It made me go through that learning process and reading a lot, listening to wise people, and trying to get the hang of the question, and then, answer it to my son in a way that he feels affirmed and comfortable about it. So learning can take place anywhere, under a variety of conditions. You can create those conditions and control it.
So then, what's the point of university studying?
To follow up on what Dr. Mohammed said, so we need to understand that life, the world, life itself is is about learning, right? And learning can actually take place anytime, at any moment, without even pushing it. You see, so I would think about this Chinese concept of Wu Wei, actionless action. You see, that you can get things done without even doing anything. You see, so that's very pragmatic. You see, that's just the way life is. You see, so that we need to be conscious of that fact that learning learning takes place anytime, at any moment. And I can also add this Zen idea of Satori or Kensho, that enlightenment can actually happen at any moment, at any time, in anywhere. While you're sweeping, while you're cooking, or just doing anything. You see, so we don't need to have a very rigid understanding of how learning actually takes place. That rigidity itself is a problem, and we need to expunge it and go with the flow and understand that life is about progress, life is about learning, and life is about transformation. Yeah.
That's interesting. So we're saying learning can take place anywhere, anytime, and learning looks different. It doesn't necessarily have to be a specific way or a specific
Precisely.
method or a specific. It doesn't have to look like enlightenment. It doesn't have to look. It is based on who you are and the experiences around you.
I'm learning right now. So
Neutral, very
precisely.
neutral.
Yeah.
And in all these instances, Dr. Rob, I wanna pose this question at you. When do you feel like when and where and how does learning happen for you or for your classes or for your students? What are some of the examples from your personal experiences?
Well, again, I'm really honored to be here to hear your stories and your experiences. So I relate 100% to everything I've heard. And sometimes the most meaningful learning for me personally has been at those most unexpected moments.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like part of learning becoming intentional and conscious, and you used the word consciousness, which I thought was really powerful, is about creating frame of mind or a mindset. And that to me is really what goes to the core of learnerization, where individuals understand that learning is part of life.
Mm-hmm.
Learning is always happening, often when we don't even realize it's happening. But then having those powerful moments where we can take stock. And earlier on in this podcast, we've heard about mindfulness.
Mm.
We've heard about awareness. We've heard about responsibility. And for me, how that translates is in using this metaphor of the classroom. Life is a classroom.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So what happens when I get into an actual classroom? Like, if I can learn everything on YouTube, on social media, who cares? Why do I spend the thousands of dollars and walk away with a paper, right? If I get stumped by a question, it takes me, despite my advanced degrees, it takes me 3 weeks to come back with an answer. But that's a real question, right? The power of the question. So what does that mean for a learner? It's simple. I use my classroom as an incubator, as a focused moment to have a conversation and develop the language of learning. What does learning mean? Why are we learning? We've talked about this before. But here in this classroom, we can unpack that. I've created a safe space so that when people go back into their lives, they're in learner mode. They're actually able to harvest those experiences and start to make those connections, right? So you're moving from lived experience to understood experience, absorbed experience. And that's where the transformation is. So then learning becomes this dynamic process that's happening all the time. And when I get back into my classroom, all of those amazing moments that happen in between the real life can then be shared in a supportive group with a supportive learner/instructor amongst a cohort of supportive classmates and co-learners, and we co-create.
That's beautiful because often we talk about a disconnect between the university setting and real life. But what we're trying to do here is emulate real life into a university setting. And that's what learnerization looks like. And to follow up with that question, any personal experience of setting goals, and how do you measure when you set up those goals? How do you measure learning outside a classroom? And based on what? Because as a student that many may be watching, all learners, they're used to an ABC system and then an F, right? And they're used to that systematic category. You're out in the open. How do you measure that success?
Well, you can, for instance, you can give students opportunities to make presentations, right? And to be creative in their presentation topics, and also to bring ideas outside of the classroom to to facilitate these presentations. So they're actually getting ideas from everywhere for their presentations. And what I've actually discovered is that I also learn a lot from these presentations, from the contributions that students are bringing into the class. And these ideas are coming from everywhere.
So to just build on what Akina's just said, I think about how I use learning journals. Now, I use one for myself, and I always encourage my students, especially on the MFA program, document, record, and it doesn't have to be in one format.
Mm-hmm.
It could be a voice note. It could be a sketch. It could be a poem that they've written or a song they've listened to. But collect those moments that are happening all the time outside the classroom and then bring them back.
Mm-hmm.
And let's make sense of them together. So that learning that's always happening, that incidental learning, is being captured in some form and then connected. And I believe earlier we talked about pieces of a puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that's the other form of learnerization. It's where we're helping learners to take pieces of the puzzles that are in their lives and create these amazing and meaningful images that are relevant to them. So to me, it's giving those tools, modeling those tools, capture the learning, dialogue with yourself, then bring the dialogue back to others, and use that capture in whatever way makes sense to you. Use the whole gamut of technology that we now have in our pockets with our cell phones, for instance.
So I just want to repose this question of, did you have to go to university to study this? And could you have just learned this from life?
So there's a lot of learning that we do outside the university, even before we get to the university. So we come with a baggage to the university itself of learning styles and methods and our own specializations, inclinations. But I would like to relate to a learning that happened outside the university, because it has to happen outside the university. And that was with a swimming coach who I was trying to learn with, and I just couldn't get it right. So he said, look, there are two ways of doing it. Either you take a whole course on swimming and then you learn swimming. And the other way is, and he pushed me into the swimming pool. And
Experience it.
it was experience. And I somehow, I don't know how it happened, because I didn't have the expertise to do that, but somehow I started floating. And I learned to float. And, then I went on to learn swimming from that point onwards. So the ice broke
Immediately.
in a very, very non-learning setting.
Yeah,
And I think that was very, very powerful for me.
that's beautiful. That's actually such a strong and funny.
And you survived, and I
You're
survived.
here. How do you measure success outside the classroom, and how does that look like?
Before I actually answer the question, or in the process of answering the question, I want to go back to the original title of this episode itself, and that is learning outside the time and space of anywhere. This learning actually cannot happen unless, like I said, there is a kind of a structure available. And I look at the binaries of life. Our life works on binaries. So we've got ups and downs and highs and lows, and well, one of the binary of life is structure and fluidity. And I think that's where this whole thing fits. The structure provides us the experience, it provides us the frameworks, and we can use those experiences and frameworks to measure what happens with learning outside this structured setting. So these binaries of life, which are, by the way, outside a university setting, they come to us from our life experiences, and we construct them. But it's on them that we build the structure of university learning. And from that university structure, we bring out the rules and regulations for outside learning as well. So it's like you once said, Dr. Rob, it's a vicious circle, but so be it. What's the problem in having a vicious circle?
C'est la vie.
It's like, what came first? Was it the university or life?
Or the chicken or the egg? Yes.
Right now, I'm just thinking about this concept of cura personalis, which in Latin means, educating for the whole human being. So it's not just about binary. It's not just about trying to separate. We're talking about this sense of wholeness, togetherness. So if education is conceived in that way, that means that you can educate within a structure, and within the context of life itself, right? So cura personalis is actually a very powerful way of thinking about this. Educating for the whole person.
That's an interesting viewpoint. Dr. Rob, do you
Yeah.
feel like
Well,
that was you?
So I have a couple of metaphors in my mind that talk to this. So I'm a linguist by training, and I'm a language lover by virtue of loving language. And I always look at language in a sense as structure that allows for creativity. Got a certain set of rules, grammar, got a certain number of words, you've got syllables, you've got pronunciation, and so on. And yet, when you give people those tools and those structures, they can then be creative. They can invent new words. They can make new sentences that have never, ever been made before from a finite set. And in a way, education for me is like that. When we have formal education where there are degrees that are granted, it's a system, it's a structure that, if utilized properly, untaps and unleashes creativity. It creates a safe space. The regulation allows for accountability and protection, right? Because nowadays in the internet world, I could say, yes, let my teens go online and learn whatever. They could also be taken in by somebody older, posing as somebody, and be manipulated to do horrible things to themselves or others and exploited, right? That's a danger of the do-it-yourself method. Whereas when we come in as people that have a moral compass, we talked about this earlier, that then guides us in wanting the best for our learners, they're in a safe space. And then we can create the opening for all of that creativity happen, right? And so it's sort of like, sure, you could learn how to drive on your own. And how many pedestrians are you going to knock over today? Versus let's go to driving school where you've got somebody who's trained to create the safe places where you can actually experiment without harming yourself and others. So that when you get into the real world, you're in a much better place to drive safely. And to me, that is the benefit of higher education when it's true to its purpose.
So let me go back to this idea of life itself. See, we need to understand that life itself is a mess. To use words from Beckett, you see, but education can actually provide the tools for making symphony out of that mess.
So
That's the way I look at it.
So we're saying if education is used correctly, it becomes a learnerized resource.
Precisely.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So because we shouldn't get this kind of this ideal understanding of life. Life is very messy. Life is difficult. Life is really very problematic and challenging, you see. But education can provide the resources, the tools for creating this sense of symphony and hope within the context of that mess.
It's a tailored experience, right? And as a designer, when we say tailored, we say customizable. And that's what we market to our clients. We tell them you're going to have a customizable market, one of a kind interior. And I think that same ethic, that same morals should be inputted in educational environment. So now we're saying all of this and it's beautiful, but there is also that disconnect. We're still facing that disconnect of connecting the dots between life and education. And to kind of final takeaways, what do you think we can do to kind of always progress and be able to connect and make the university, make the spaces like these more learnerized, more catered to us and not the other way around?
You need to watch this podcast.
Like
I love the plugs.
Plugins.
Go, Mohammed, go.
So, but the other thing is, I think it's a summary of what has just been said right now.
Yeah.
You need to use the space of structured education and throw in flexibility within that structure so that the structure doesn't become a monster of its own and doesn't impede the right development of both instructors and students towards this process of learnerization.
That's beautiful. And then the structure connects you, part of being fluid, it connects you to life. And you have that direct,
Yes.
direct relationship. They're not two separate entities. They impact one another. Please go ahead, Dr. Rob.
Yeah, just to use our classroom as that incubator and that touchstone, that support group where we can come together and talk about those individualized and out of the class learning moments and make sense of them. That's the power of the group, and that's the power of the institution to really liberate people as opposed to imprisoning them and becoming beholden to a very limited set of tasks. To use that language metaphor again, it'd be like just repeating the same words all the time and never expanding on them, never recombining them, never creating new words. That's the opposite end of the spectrum.
Yeah. Creativity within the context of institutional limitations.
Beautiful. I mean, we touched on so many different aspects of learnerization and how that happens outside the classroom, but how can we also have our resources within university help us connect to those? And I think that's an invaluable. And, I think what we're doing here, for me at least, it's an idea. We're spreading an idea. That's not going to happen one day and one night. There's so many structures in that. But I think the more we speak about it, the more we get somewhere. And thank you all for being here.
Okay, very so much. It's been a privilege and an honor.
Alhamdulillah.